Hello again. This is the parallel time, alternate world, what have you, uh, baseball league, and getting around to rounding up the division rosters. So, in the National League Central, we have the Detroit Tigers, and to start out with, we have Red Wilson at catcher, along with utility man John Walkenfuss. At first base, Gail Harris. At second, Frank Bowling. At shortstop, we have a multitude. We have Tom Verizon, Billy Martin, who also plays a little at the hot corner, and Milt Bowling, another one, a brother, I believe. Over at third, we have Dan Meyer and Aurelio Rodriguez. In the outfield, the legend Al Kaline, Ron LaFleur, Gentle Ben Ogilvy, Leon Roberts, Charlie Maxwell, and Gus Zernial. At DH, we have Willie Horton. In the rotation, we have Frank Larry, future Senator Jim Bunning, Paul Foytak, Dave Lemancic, and Vern Rule. And in the pen, Al Seacott, John Hiller, Laren LeGros, Woody Fryman, and Mickey Lolich. Next, we have the Chicago Cubs. And at catcher, we have Cal Neiman and Steve Swisher. At first base, Pete Lecoq, the son of Peter Marshall of Hollywood Squares, and Andre Thornton. At second base, we have Tony Taylor and Dave Rosello. At shortstop, Mr. Cub, Ernie Banks. and Don Kessinger. At third base, Bill Madlock. In the outfield, we have Bobby Thompson. I believe he was born in Scotland. Walter Morin. Lee Walls. Jerry Morales. Jose Cardinal. He was a customer of mine at my last job when I was in retail. He was working at a baseball school in Bradenton, Florida, I believe. And Rick Monday. In the rotation, we have Rick Russell, Steve Stone, that's Carey's old sidekick in the broadcasting booth, Bill Bonham, Dave Hillman, and Bert Hooten. In the bullpen, lefty Bill Henry, Don Elston, Jim Todd, Ray Burris, and Dave LaRoche. And last but not least, pinch hitter Matt Alexander. Next, we have the Minnesota Twins. At catcher, we have Clint Courtney and Glenn Borgman. At first base, Rod Carew and Craig Cusick. At second, Herb Plews and Louis Gomez. At short, we have Rocky Bridges and Sergio Ferrer. At third base, Harmon Killebrew, Eric Soderholm, and Jerry Terrell. In the outfield, Albie Pearson, Jim Lemon, Roy Sievers, Steve Bry, Steve Braun, and Larry Heisel. In the starting rotation, Bert Blyleven, Dave Goltz, Russ Kemmerer, and Camilo Pasquale. And in the pen, Of a few familiar faces to Red Sox fans. Bill Campbell, Tom Bergmeyer. Then we have Dick Mr. Hyde, Vito Valentinetti, and Tex Clevenger. Next, we have the Milwaukee Brewers. At catcher, Charlie Moore and Darryl Porter. At first, George Scott, Bob Boyd, and Vic Wertz. At second base, we have Tim Johnson and Johnny Temple. At shortstop, we have Johnny Logan, formerly of the Milwaukee Braves, and Robin Yount. And at the hot corner, we have Don Money and Vic Power. In the outfield, Larry Doby, Bob Neiman, Gorman Thomas, 6'2" Lizcano, that's his best year in '79, and Felipe Alou. In the rotation, not necessarily in order, we have Don Newcomb, Bob Buell, also a former Milwaukee Brave, Kevin Corbell, Bill Travers, Joey J, and Jim Slayton. And in the pen, we have Bill Castro, Tom Buskey, Ed Rodriguez, and Hal Jeffcoat. And that wraps up the NL Central anyway. I think we will wrap it up tonight with the NL West on this same video. Okay, continuing on with the National League West. We have the catchers for the LA Dodgers, Steve Yeager and Johnny Roseboro. At first base, we have Steve Garvey and Bill Buckner. At second base, from Rhode Island, Davey Lopes. At shortstop, we have Bill Russell and Ivan DeJesus. Also Rick Auerbach, I think. I may have to double check that, but it seems like I wouldn't have gotten them mixed up. And at the hot corner, Ron Say, the Penguin. In the outfield, not what you would expect, but we have Tom Paciorek, the left fielder. We have Joe Ferguson, also a catcher. The star, Carl Furillo. John Hale. Ron Fairley, who played, I think it was 21 years. He ended up in the Blue Jays in 78. He started out in 58. And Vaughn Joshua. And off the bench with his bat is Manny Mota. In the rotation, Tommy John, Don Sutton, Eddie Solomon, Rick Rhoden, Jeff Zahn, and Doug Rao. And in the pen, Mike Marshall, one of the heroes of the 74 pennant winning team. Don Beesant, Ed Sears and Roebuck, Andy Hassler, and Charlie Huff, the knuckler. And here come the San Francisco Giants. We have Bob Schmidt at catcher, along with Dave Rader. At first, Orlando Cepeda, the baby bull, and Danny O'Connell. At shortstop, we have Darryl Spencer, Chris Beyer, and utility man Mike Phillips. At third, Ray Jablonski and Steve Ontiveros. Now, unlike the Dodgers, these guys are stacked in the outfield. We have Bobby Bonds, Gary Matthews, Dave Kingman, Gary Maddox, Gary Thomason, Leon Wagner, and last but not least, Whitey Lockman. In the starting rotation, we have John, the Count of Montefusco, Ed Hilicki, Mike Caldwell, Jim Barr, and Johnny Antonelli. And in the bullpen, Stu Miller, lefty Gary Lavelle, Elias Sosa, Don McMahon, and John D'Acquisto. Next, we have the San Diego Padres. At catcher, Joe Pignatano and Fred Kendall. At first, Willie McCovey and Mike Ivy. At second, Bill Ullman and Charlie Neal. At shortstop, Don Zimmer and Bob Lillis. And at third base, Andy Carey. In the outfield, we have the hometown hero and the player manager, Ted Williams. Jerry Turner, sometimes called John. Roman Mejias. Jim Gilliam. Dave Winfield. Daryl Thomas plays a lot of positions. And Johnny Grubb. And the utility man, jack of all trades, Dave Roberts. In the starting rotation, we have Sandy Koufax going a little bit south to continue his career. Johnny Padres. Hal Woodashek. Randy Jones. And George Red Witt. And in the pen, Dan Spillner, Al Worthington, Dave Tomlin, and Dave Frieselben. And the final team to wrap up the National League West is the transplanted Chicago White Sox. They moved to Vancouver and became the Vancouver Canadians. At catcher, Brian Downing and Earl Batty. At first base, Lamar Johnson and Ron Jackson. At second base, Jorge Orta and Nellie Fox. At shortstop, Louis Aparicio and Bucky Dent. At third base, Bill Stein and Billy Goodman. In the outfield, Jim Rivera, Al Smith, Jim Landis, Ted Beard, Johnny Callison, and rounding it out is Jerry Hairston. And in the rotation, Dick Donovan, Jim Wilson, Wilbur Wood. I had to bring him out of the 78 set because he had retired, but I wanted to give him a chance to play. Billy Pierce and Francisco Barrios. He left us too young. In the pen, Rich Gossage, Stan Benson, Jim Cott, the lefty, another lefty, Terry Forrester, and Jerry Staley. And that wraps up the rosters for the Parallel Time, Alternate World, Baseball Association. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.